All Orthodox should be Catholic.
Well, no, I have something to say about that because I definitely believe that all. Oh. Sorry. When I thought I wrote it, I thought I wrote that all Catholics should be Orthodox, and it just must have been like a Freudian slip in that.
Hey everybody, this is Moses, and this is my fiance Taryn. As you know, I'm Orthodox, and she's a Roman Catholic.
Today we're going to play a little game of hot takes. So we wrote down some controversial topics between the two of us, our two faiths. So let's get into this. Here we go.
All right, ladies first.
Haha, the first hot take. Baptism removes original sin.
Yeah, so I really think that baptism is the doorway into the kingdom. You know, I think it does cleanse us, but I don't really believe that I was born guilty just because I was born with the sin of Adam. I don't.
So as a Catholic, I believe not necessarily that we're born guilty, but that we're born deprived of being able to go to heaven. So in other words, like when Adam and Eve sinned, they took away the gift of being able to obviously be with God. So as we were born, as their Adam and Eve's descendants, as we were born, we're stained with original sin. Not that we're personally guilty for it because technically we didn't do anything, but we're stained with what they did. So we can't go to heaven until we have sanctifying grace, which is what baptism imparts on us.
See,
when we're baptized.
That's where I guess it's like semantics or something, because Adam and Eve did what Adam and Eve did, not Moses and Taryn. I think about even just when they sinned, they introduced consequences of that sin. And the consequences were like, okay, we're now in a fallen world with death and decay and everything else, but I wasn't born with the stain of their sin. I was born the way I was born because even the Bible said, God knew me, in my mother's womb, pretty much. So I don't believe that He creates us with sin already. I just don't.
It's not that He creates us with sin. I think that at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that He gave us baptism so we can then enter into the kingdom of heaven with Him. So He said to us, like Adam and Eve sinned, they took all that. I died on the cross for you, so you have the ability to go to heaven one day. Mm-hmm. But you still are a descendant of Adam. In which case, you still enter this world being deprived of heaven. So you can't enter heaven unless that deprivation is removed and you are united with God.
So that would be a consequence.
Through grace.
That's a consequence, right?
What do you mean?
What do you mean by that?
Meaning like our deprivation from heaven, that's a consequence of what happened.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so we're not born with the guilt of what they did.
It's not guilt, no. That's what I'm saying. It's not really seen as the guilt. It's more seen as we need grace in order to be able to be united with God one day.
All right, let's see what we got. All Catholics should be Orthodox.
Interesting.
Yes.
You know what I believe? I believe all Orthodox should be Catholic. And I think that it's like you're almost Catholic, but you're like, you sit around and you're like, I don't really want to be Catholic, so I'm just going to be almost Catholic.
Yeah, no. See, I believe that we are the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. I believe that we are the church that Jesus and His apostles founded with the faith once deposited, and we've guarded it from then until now.
So you're talking about the Catholic Church?
No. Well, yeah, exactly. I am talking about the Catholic Church. The Orthodox Catholic Church. It's Orthodox. You know what Orthodox means?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
You tell me.
Right teaching. We
are also Orthodox.
No.
And we're also Catholic. We are Orthodox, but we're also Catholic because we actually are universal.
we are we are universal though. We are universal.
But you want to know the coolest thing about the Catholic Church?
Sure.
Is that I can go to the depths of the jungles of Africa and I can celebrate the same exact mass I celebrate there as I celebrate here in the United States, which is very different.
We can too.
But not quite the same way, because you do have your different jurisdictions of faith. Different jurisdictions of your faith.
Yeah, but
Which are
see,
slightly different.
that's not No, that's a misnomer. So the Orthodox faith is the Orthodox faith. A jurisdictional or like an administrational difference is just that. It's jurisdictional and administrational. The Orthodox faith is the faith. So I could still go to would you say the depths of the jungles of Africa? I could still go there.
The problem is that they're not going to be in the depths of the jungles.
Yo, yes they will be.
But the Catholic Church, they're going to be there.
Listen, I truly believe that, Orthodoxy, the faith of Orthodoxy is the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. I do. I believe that it is the faith once deposited to the apostles, and I stand on that. I do believe, Catholics have a lot of, good things, like a right teaching, some good doctrine, but I think they're missing out on the fullness of the faith.
And that's kind of how I feel about the Orthodox, obviously. I mean, in the sense that I think that you guys are almost there. It's like, there are some, I think that the only reason why you're not there is political, and for a lot of different reasons. And I think that one day the whole world will be Catholic.
Everybody will be Orthodox at one point in time, yes.
Orthodox Catholic, you could say, but my version of Orthodox, which is actual Orthodox Catholic.
There's only one.
And you're looking at one right here.
All right.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
All right. We have an obligation to go to church on Sunday.
So I definitely think the Sunday obligation thing is sort of like over legalistic, and I believe that God gives us a choice. Okay, so the church is a hospital, with Christ being the physician. Okay, and I'm sick. Literally, right now I'm sick. But if I'm sick, I choose to go to the hospital. Why? To see the physician, to get prescribed the medicine. I have a choice to go there. With you guys, if you don't go to mass or something like that, you're in a state of what? Mortal or grave sin?
Mortal sin, yeah.
So you can be damned to hell for that? Like, really?
Well, the thing is that obviously the only reason you would be, okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
What?
Okay, so obviously we have an obligation to go to church on Sunday because, first of all, it's not very much to ask, of your people, of God's people to just say, hey, spend an hour with me on Sunday, and the reason why it's Sunday, obviously, is because that is our day of rest. That is the Lord's Day. That is the day that we spend time with God. It's not so much, it's really not that much to be obliged to make Sunday belong to the Lord. But we still do have a choice. Obviously, we have free will. But the thing is that you have a choice whether you're going to wake up that day and you're going to choose Christ on Sunday, or if you're not going to.
But how is it a choice if it's an obligation? If I'm obligated to do this, you know what I mean? Or I'm in trouble.
Because you still have the choice whether to not do it or to do it.
So if you think that you think Christ, the loving God that He is extremely upset to the point of damning you to hell if you didn't go to mass?
Well, look at it like this. First of all, the mortal sin, being in a state of mortal sin, you only go to hell if you die within the state of mortal sin. So if I woke up one day and I said to myself, I do not feel like going to church today, and there was no good reason for me not to go to church, because obviously God's all merciful. There's always situations when you're ill, when you have, if you're a new mother and you have to stay home with your baby. There's different scenarios where God's going to be, merciful in your Sunday obligation. Or like during COVID, there was definitely some instances where we couldn't go to church. So there was no way for us to be, be in a state of mortal sin when it obviously wasn't our fault. So it's very particular like that. It's not just don't go to church, go to hell, but also at the same time.
Let me say this. I believe that God's people should go to church. That it says in the Bible, do not forsake the assembly, okay? And where in the midst of where there's 2 or 3 gathered, there I am. I do believe that we should go to church. I do believe that we should partake in the Eucharist. But I also believe that these are things that He's given to us and we can take. If we don't partake of those things, that's on us. I don't necessarily see it the legalistic way of like, well, you're not going here. This is a strike against you. I just don't understand. I don't understand that, and I just don't view God in that legal, transactional way. Where it's like you're obligated to do this because you are a Christian.
But that's kind of the thing that separates us from like Protestants, for instance.
Sure.
So they have most Protestants believe, yeah, sure, you should go to church on Sunday, but it's not necessarily something that you have to do. That's really one of the things that separates Catholics from all other faiths is that, we really believe, and that's something that's been instilled in me since I was a child, that on Sunday, we go to church because we have to go to church because that is the day we devote to the Lord. Even if for the rest of the week, we've been terrible human beings,
sure.
Sunday belongs to God.
And I agree with that. Well, one, I agree that all days belong to God, so we should be praying. We should be praying. We should be following the fast. We should be reading the lives of the saints. We should do all these things, not just on Sundays, but as it relates to Sunday, the Orthodox will tell you, yes, you need to be there. You should be there. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that, we see it such as like a mortal sin, to be in a state of mortal sin if you don't. Those pews or those, naves and stuff like that, they're packed. Every Sunday, Vespers, things like that. People are in there. So we do take it very seriously. I just don't, like, for example, there's a lot of Orthodox there in church every Sunday. We don't have the same doctrine that if you're not there, you're in a state of mortal sin. So people want to be there. They want to be there. But I feel like the Catholic way is almost like a threat. It's almost like a threat. Well, if you're not here, you're going to be in big trouble there, buddy. I don't.
Well, there's also the other sense of it too, is that like especially when you're a kid, or your parents, right, and you're teaching your kids, this is what we do on Sunday, right? This is what we go to church. I know from my own experiences, for myself, for friends that I've had along the way, mm-hmm. like their parents didn't instill that same, hey, you have to go to church on Sundays. Mm-hmm. So they went to college and they didn't go to church on Sundays, and they left the faith, and oftentimes they never come back to it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, for a reason of trying to appreciating it, right? Of appreciating why we go to church on Sunday, knowing why we go to church on Sunday, and making it the habit of your entire life to go to church on Sunday, especially when you're young. I think that obligation, or knowing that you do have that obligation, that there is a punishment attached to not fulfilling your obligation, helps psychologically to understand that, okay, this actually is a serious thing. Like, going to church is a serious thing, and I have to do it. Something that I, because even if I'm not feeling particularly holy that day, well, fake it till you make it. You go to church, even if you're sitting there, you're not really, if you're not having a good day, or, whatever's going on, but you did make it to church, and then maybe you're able to come out of whatever that thing is.
Sure.
But maybe you never would have made it there without that obligation. So I look at it as a bunch of different type of facets, obviously, and this would be a different topic for a different discussion. We always say keep holy the Sabbath, and that's kind of where we get that obligation from. Sabbath, seventh day, keep holy the Sabbath, that's where we get the church obligation from. And I know that Orthodox do that a little bit differently.
All right.
But final hot take.
Let's do it. The early church always held a conciliar model, not a papal one. That's true.
Well, obviously, I just kind of look at it like this, right? Peter is the leader of the apostles. Jesus said, "On this rock I will build my church," referring to Peter. Gave him the keys to the kingdom, and just literally, simply to me, just in the model of the apostles, how the apostles all, treated Peter as their leader. I think that that's kind of how the apostolic faith should
go.
Be.
Okay. Obviously I disagree with it coming from the other side. I just really think that Peter, while he was, the boss of the apostles, he definitely was, but he still was the first among equals, and meaning that Christ gave the apostles equal authority. Now, he said, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." I've always taken that to mean that the confession that Peter made right beforehand was the rock that he was going to build his church on. And then, you see other examples, even the Jerusalem Council in the Bible, where James was the presiding bishop over the Jerusalem Council. I think that's in Acts 15. So there are numerous ways to look at it. I see that Rome was definitely highly honored because, it has the bodies of St. Paul and St. Peter. But I just don't see through history where they all were under one bishop. It was always a council of bishops up until a certain point, so.
Well, I don't claim to be, obviously, an expert on church history. That's not necessarily my forte. I know my faith really well. But oftentimes I see certain things like this from a more logical standpoint, in the sense that, I don't think that God would have left his church without a leader, without one person for everyone to be under. So obviously, everybody's under God, right? Obviously, everyone's under God. But a visible leader, I don't think God would have left us with a church without a visible leader. And when there's too many roosters in the coop, that's when we have lots of problems. So regardless of whether the Pope is somebody who is a good person, because obviously a lot of people aren't really too big of fans of Pope Francis, myself included. There's been many of terrible bad popes throughout the years. We've also had a lot of good popes.
Well, let me ask you something about that, just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you guys refer to the papacy or the Pope himself as the vicar of Christ.
Right.
Like he is basically the representation of Christ on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, how could there ever be a bad Pope?
Because they're still human. So every Pope is still human. So even if they're taking on this role as leader of the church, they still fall like everybody else. Nobody has any type of special, these men, obviously there's been saints, there's popes that were saints, and who were extra holy people, but that doesn't mean that they're not people. So they're still tempted by sin. They still have to make the choices that we have to make every day, and I think God gives us bad popes in order to test our faith as well. Mm-hmm. So, you could have a pope standing up there just claiming heretical things, but also at the same time, I think that God has also protected the church over the years because there have been so many bad popes. So there's been many instances when a pope could have completely changed the doctrine of the church, but the doctrine of the church has stayed the same throughout many years.
Well,
throughout all time.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's one thing that's big for me about Orthodoxy, because the Orthodox Church hasn't had one leader or a pope, but they're still here. We are a smaller branch, a more humble branch, but we are still here. They were trounced, under pressure from the Ottoman Empire, and we didn't have as much political power and money, but the church just kept on being the church, and it's still here and survived without the Pope.
I think God's hoping that one day you will be under the Pope, and so he keeps holding on to that little hope. Keeps bringing you back. He's bringing you back saying, come on guys, you're almost there, you can make it.
Get out of here. All right. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notifications bell so you don't miss an upload.